Hello, it's Debbie Gilbert here from the Business Awards show, and I'm also the founder of the Best Business Women Awards. And you are listening to the 100th episode of the Business Awards show. I can't quite believe it because I know how many people give up on their podcasts within the first few episodes because, it takes time to build. And I've had a fantastic journey running this podcast, met so many amazing people. And, you have to put a bit of thought into who do you want as your guest for your 100th episode. And I thought to myself, I want to bring on the woman who worked with me to get this podcast off the ground. Welcome to Lynsay Gould, founder of the Podcast Boutique.
Thank you, Debbie. I am honoured to be on for your 100th episode, and I can't believe how quickly it's gone, to be honest.
I know. Well, let's take the listeners through the journey. So I had been, I'm going to say, procrastinating about starting a podcast for quite a while. And I had been in your Facebook group. Remind us of the name of the Facebook group.
Podcasting for Business Community.
There you go. So I was in there, and it's a great community. And I had sort of read the posts and I'd watched some of your videos, Lynsay. And I'd started my plan and I'd started some ideas, and I knew I wanted to call it the Business Awards show. Why wouldn't it be called that? And there was nobody else really podcasting about business awards. So I knew that there was, and you always talk about the niche. So I knew there was a need for it. And I procrastinated for quite some time. And then I'm one of these people that likes to plan for the following year towards the end of the previous year. And I'd been a bit like this when I wrote a book. I'd kind of done half of the job and not finished it. But I managed to get the book published, and it did really well, and it's still selling really well. So the podcast really was a bit like that. And then I remember listening to you talking about your program that basically takes it, a lot of it, the hard, grafty bits where you're trying to set up everything. And it was like this sort of, moment of, I need to speak to Lynsay. I need to get them to set up the first 6 episodes and set up all the nuts and bolts, and then train my team to do all the editing and all the bits that you need to do ongoing. And that's where our journey began, wasn't it?
It was. It was. I can't believe it's gone that quickly. I really can't. I know I keep saying it, but I can't believe it's gone that quickly. That just shows me how busy we've been in the last few years, because it's flown by. You've done phenomenally well. And
thank
congratulations on getting past the first 10 episodes, because the first 10 episodes are where most people quit.
Is it? That's interesting.
So around 10 episodes, they go into pod fade, that we like to call it, and they don't release any more episodes. So you've done incredibly well. Well done.
Well, I think it was all down to you, really, and the structure and the training that we had. Because I think, I speak to a lot of people that say, I'm going to start a podcast, and it can't be that difficult. And I wouldn't say it's difficult, but it is a time commitment, isn't it?
It is. It is a time commitment. And you do have to
set aside that time. And I'm going to share what happened about our first episode, because it was quite funny in a way. So Lynsay gets you to record everything, and they do the design, and they do all of your, setting up of your podcast online and all the things that need to be done. And I recorded my first episode and I sent it to Lynsay, and Lynsay came back to me and said, you need to re-record this. This really isn't good enough. And I would suggest maybe
nicer words than that, but yeah.
No, but it was good, because you need that.
You do.
And she said, I would suggest getting someone to interview you about the awards and about the podcast. And if you listen to episode 1, you will hear me being interviewed by Lavelda, who, it was the best decision, really, because she's a great, interviewer, speaker. She's also a host of events. And actually, that suggestion that you made, I think, really set the scene for the podcast, because I think the first 2 or 3 episodes do set the scene, don't they?
100% they do. Yeah, people get a real good idea about whether they want to continue listening just from those first few episodes. 100%. I'm really glad you took that advice.
So have I. But I don't think if I'd have gone off and done this by myself, I probably would have put that out there thinking it was good enough. Only because I didn't know what was good and what wasn't.
Yeah.
And so having you on board, somebody who's launched, well, I mean, you must be into thousands of podcasts now, if not hundreds. I don't know.
It's hundreds and hundreds. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not quite 1,000, but yeah, hundreds. Yeah.
And I think working with an expert on something in your business is so important. So that kind of brings me on to talk a bit about you, because, you know, you didn't just wake up one day and go, oh, I think I'll start a podcast business. So let's listen a bit about your journey. What brought you to the podcast boutique?
Yeah, it was a bit of a strange one because, as I shared just before we hit record, my background before podcasting couldn't be more different. So for 20 years, I was in HR. I was in corporate HR, and a very, very different job. But one of the things that I had to do a lot in that job was drive. I was on the road all of the time. I was traveling all over the world as well. I was in India and Europe and all over the country every week. And I live in the northwest of England, and I was traveling to London at least twice a week. So it was heavy on traffic. And a lot of that time I spent listening to podcasts, like practically all the time I spent listening to podcasts. And it was around that time that I started to, you know, I was getting more and more senior in my job. I had head of and director roles, and I was starting to fall out of love with it. I really believe in HR as an industry, but when you get to a certain level in HR, it becomes more of a PR job, really. It's more about protecting the company's reputation than anything else. And I just fell out of love with it, because what I got into HR for was to help people grow, develop. And I loved seeing people, you know, start from day one and just really grow into something amazing. So around this time when I was traveling a lot, I knew that I wanted to start my own business. I knew that I wanted to go out and work for myself, initially as a HR consultant and coach, which is what I was trained as. And that's what I did. So my husband started teaching in September. And I remember him coming home after that first week in his new job and saying, what did you think? Have you enjoyed it? And he said, I wish I'd done it sooner. And when he said, I wish I'd done it sooner, it just everything clicked for me. And I thought, right, by the end of this year, I'm going to do it. So that was September. And then by the end of that year, I'd left and I'd started working for myself. So during that time, I remembered all the podcasts I've been listening to, and I started my own podcast, and it was horrendous. It was really hard work. So I didn't know what I didn't know. And there were so many times I wanted to just throw my laptop out the window and think, what the hell am I doing? I just thought, oh, I've listened to loads of them. I know what to do. So there started a massive learning curve, and I got better and better. And I started to get so many inquiries from my clients and people in my audience saying, how have you done this? You know, how do you make money from this? How do you make it work? What mic do you need? All those things.
Yeah.
So I started doing sort of workshops on the side for people whilst I was doing consultancy work and coaching. And it got to the stage where it was about 50-50. I was doing 50% podcast work, 50% consultancy. So I decided to take the scary leap and go into the unknown. So I stopped my consultancy work and went all in on creating this agency, the Podcast Boutique. And it was just little old me right at the start. I was doing literally everything, all the consultancy, the development, the editing, the marketing, everything. And we've grown steadily since there, really. My husband now works with us full time. He's not in teaching anymore. My eldest daughter, who's got a master's in production, she now works with me. And we've got a team of incredible editors and designers, and it's just grown from strength to strength. We absolutely love what we do. So again, I guess the short answer is I got into podcasting from a passion for it. I absolutely loved it. And I've always been that techie girl, techie geek who, you know, enjoys working with things like this. So that's the potted history, really.
So that's amazing. So if someone's listening to this and they're thinking, oh, Where do I start? Where do I start? What's the first step I need to take? What would you advise them to do?
So the first step with having your own podcast is to listen to some.
Yeah.
That's the very first step. I've had a few people recently say to me they want to start a podcast and they say, actually, I don't actually listen to podcasts. And I always think to myself, well, how do you know this is something you want to do? And it can it can feel like you're just getting on the bandwagon, because it feels, if you're in our industry and you're online quite a lot, it probably feels like a lot of people have podcasts and they're everywhere, but they're really not. You know, there are less than 5 million podcasts and less than 1 million of those are active. And if you compare that to 34.5 million YouTube channels, it's tiny in comparison. So the first thing you need to do is listen to some podcasts in your niche and think, okay, is this something that I think I'm going to enjoy doing? Then you could maybe be a guest. That would be a nice thing to do. So go on and be a guest on somebody's podcast. And then if you've got the bug and you think, yes, this is for me, if you are somebody who enjoys speaking above writing, or you enjoy speaking above being on video, then podcasting is definitely for you. So the first thing you would do is think about who your podcast is for, why you're doing it, and what do you want to get out of it. So who it's for is really important, because if you're speaking to everyone, you're speaking to nobody. You need to really get a defined niche. And then, you know, why you're starting this podcast in the first place, you know, and what you want it to do for your business. You don't just start something for the sake of it. You know, we're all busy people. You need a goal like you would with any other launch in your business. So think about what you want to get out of it. Is it you want people to buy your book? Do you want them to join your membership? Do you want them to enter your awards? Yeah, whatever it might be, have some really tangible goals, and start from there. And then if you aren't a techie person, then you can come and work with somebody like me. There's lots of us out here, agencies who can support you to get your podcast started. So don't let a fear of tech hold you back. You know, you have the message, you have the knowledge, you have the passion about your subject. You can do that and let somebody else do all the techie graft around you.
Yeah, I think that's true. And that's exactly what I did.
Mm.
And I still don't edit my own podcast, and I still don't, you know,
You don't need
upload it.
to.
No, I've got someone who does it, and it's, you know, it's just a job that I don't have to do. And I love doing this bit, which is the chatting to
Yeah,
people and the talking and finding out. I'm very nosy, Lynsay.
that's a really
That's
good trait for a podcast host. You've got to
so I
be
like to
interested in
know.
people. You
Yeah.
have to be.
And we've had so many amazing guests on this show, because they're not just all winners of the Best Business Women Awards. They
Mm,
are also just business people who have won awards,
mm,
and who are incredible in their own industries. And I've also interviewed people who have their own business awards, sponsors of awards, and judges of
mm.
awards. So it's quite an eclectic mix, but the common theme is you have to be involved in awards some way, shape, or form.
Yeah.
So that's my criteria.
Mm.
So do you think it's important for podcast hosts to have a criteria of their guests?
1,000,000%. Yes. 1,000,000%. So my personal view, like this isn't the view of everyone, but my personal view is the only people that should be on your podcast apart from you
Mm.
is, you know, somebody that you would love to work with in one way or another, or somebody you've already worked with. So somebody you've already worked with, you know, you can do a case study, you can talk about what it was like to work with them and what results they got. And then the other interviews that you do with people who you would like to work with, it might be that, you know, it's not paid work, but you might want to collaborate with them in some way. But somebody you want to work with, so a podcast interview is a great way to build rapport and a, you know, a relationship and start a friendship potentially. So I absolutely believe that's the case. I think it's a solid strategy for people who are in business, in service-based business owners, you know, where they can build relationships with people and then potentially get business as well. You have to think about the value they give to your audience. You know, if they're not going to come on and give value, what is the point in having them on there in the first place? So yeah, be very picky. It's very easy at the beginning to go, yeah, yes, you can come on, because you think, you know, I want everybody to come on my podcast. But the pickier you are with your guests, the better.
That's really good advice. So monetizing a podcast, this is what I get asked a lot. You know, people say to me, "Oh, do you make loads of money out of your podcast?" And I say, "No, I don't. Not in a straightforward
Yeah.
sense, but yes, in the way that it's a form of marketing and a form of advertising."
Yes.
But obviously, there are people who have paid ads on their podcasts. So, what's your thoughts around that?
Yeah, I mean, everybody thinks of sponsorships and ads when they think of monetizing a podcast. And yes, that is one way to go, but it's not the most lucrative way to go.
No.
Definitely not. The most profitable way to make money from your podcast is without a doubt with your own products and services. So as you quite rightly said, you know, it's a marketing tool. It's a marketing tool to shorten the amount of time between somebody finding you and then signing up to work with you. That's how it works. So people find you, and often they will binge listen to your episodes. So what would normally take weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks, or potentially months to get to know somebody, they can do it in a weekend by listening to 20 episodes or whatever. So people do binge listen, and they get an idea of whether they want to work with you very, very quickly. And they self-select themselves. They decide whether they're the best fit to work with you or not. So it's a fantastic way to sort of funnel people through this process that you can have at the beginning about, you know, are we right to work with each other? Are we not? So when somebody signs up for a call to talk about working with you, if they've listened to your podcast, they're much more likely to say yes, because they feel like they already know you.
Yeah.
So that is the quickest way to make money from a podcast, and it's definitely the most profitable way, for sure.
Yeah, for sure. Because me personally, I don't like listening to podcasts that have adverts in the middle. You know, I listen to a lot of podcasts, and you know, I was listening to Rob Brydon the other week, and he has ads in the middle of his podcast, and it sort of disrupts your listening. I mean, you can listen ad free if you've got Amazon Prime with his podcast, but there's a few people that I've just stopped listening to because I find it quite annoying just to get adverts in the middle.
I don't mind them so much. I don't
You don't
mind
mind?
ads because you can always skip them for a start. You
Of
can always
course,
skip
yeah.
them. But there is some really interesting stats around podcast advertising that if you talk about a product or a service on your podcast, your 16%, your sales will be 16% higher than if you were just to talk about it on social media. So let that sink in. 16% more sales if you talk about it on your podcast. So yeah, have a think about it.
No, that's true. Well, I've had some feedback from my guests over the years where we've obviously linked their business in our show notes, and we put the video up onto YouTube as well.
Yeah.
So we try and get as much juice from the interview as we possibly can. Who have had leads from people listening to the podcast. And I had an email only about 3 weeks ago from someone I interviewed 2 years ago who said to me, "Oh my goodness, I've just signed a client who heard our podcast interview."
Amazing. I
yeah,
love that. Well done.
I know. So it's really interesting how that works. And as well, I think if you're a guest on a podcast and it's indexed properly on Google, then you'll probably get invitations to go on other podcasts if they listen to that episode and like what they hear. So it has that kind of ripple effect, doesn't it?
It 100% does. It's there forever. And it's one of the main reasons that people start them nowadays, particularly 2023, 2024, where people want to be less reliant on social media. It's a noisy, noisy place online. And your podcast is just there forever. You know, it's out there. Like you just said, your guest had a client 2 years later. That's how it works. It's there forever. And it's this snowball effect. The more episodes you get out there, the more chances you are of being found.
Yeah, because I think what you said earlier is true, that people might listen to the episode that you put out this week, for example, because we'll put out, say, a social media post with it.
Yeah.
And then they'll enjoy that. And then they'll start looking back at all the other episodes and look for the things that they're interested in and the people that they want to listen to. So I think, you know, it's pushing through those first 10 to 12 episodes when you don't get huge, listening figures always to start with, isn't it? It's about pushing through that.
Yes.
And almost stepping over it, because I think it's like anything in business. When you launch a website, you're not going to get thousands of visitors the first few months or even years when when your website launches. So I think it's about perseverance, isn't it, really?
Yeah, definitely. It's podcasting isn't a get rich quick scheme, definitely not. And a lot of people think it is, and it's not. It's a marketing tool. It's a marketing tool, and it's a fantastic way to build an audience of loyal listeners who will think of you first when they need the thing that you sell.
Which is great advice.
Yeah.
In terms of planning a launch for a podcast, I mean, we worked together for about 3 months, didn't we, before the podcast went live? Would you suggest that's a good benchmark, around 3 months?
Yeah, I think if you're brand new to podcasting, 6 to 12 weeks tends to work. But yeah, 3 months is a really nice amount of time to not feel rushed, to be able to really plan your content and to have some episodes ready to go when you launch, so that you're not feeling that you need to be constantly producing episodes. Because I don't recommend people, record on the fly. It's so much better for you and your own sanity if you've got, a batch of episodes ready to go. So yeah, about 3 months is a good amount of time to be thinking about. So if you were wanting to launch in September, you'd be thinking in June to get started.
Yeah. So that's good advice. I mean, I went down the road of creating a website for my podcast. I mean, I know lots of people that don't do that, but I wanted to just mention it because it's massively, massively helped me with traffic to what I'm doing, which is Business Awards. Because the website's called the Business Awards Show. And if people type in Business Awards Show into Google, we come up on page 1.
That's amazing. Yeah,
and
exactly.
I think it's really putting that thought into the name of your podcast is quite important, isn't it?
Oh, 100%. It's the most important thing. Like, people will come to me and say, oh, I want to call it this. And it's a really obscure, clever, quirky name. And it sounds really great, but you've got to think about SEO. You've got to think about what people are typing into Google to answer their problem or their issue or what they're looking for. So you've literally got the perfect name for your podcast. It's the perfect name. And having it on a website is the best thing to do, because you don't want to be sending traffic to Apple and Spotify. You want to be sending it to your website where you can show them all the other things that you do. Definitely. So you've definitely had the right idea by having it on your podcast from the start.
Thank you.
On your website, rather.
Yeah.
On your website.
It was but I'd already bought the domain name before, you and I started working together, because I'd already come up with the name and I knew that was the name I wanted. And at the time, there was no other podcasts about business awards. And then somebody did launch one just before mine launched. They did drop it off. It was like a case of, I think there was about 16 episodes and then it stopped. And it's still there, but it doesn't compete with mine. I was a guest actually on that podcast, and the owner of that podcast also came onto my podcast. So I do believe interviewing competitors can actually be quite a good thing sometimes.
Yeah, that's an interesting way to look at it. Yeah, it's an interesting way to look at it. I think often when I'm recommending what shows to be on as a guest, I would normally recommend that you go on to complementary niches. So if you are a business coach, you might want to go on to like a health and well-being coach podcast, for example, something complementary but doesn't talk necessarily about the same thing. But yeah, that's a brave and bold idea, Debbie. I'm glad you did it.
Yeah, no, it was good. And I felt that we both benefited from the discussions that we had on our, on our podcasts. And I think for me, the biggest thing it's done for me is the door opening. Is actually the people that I've spoken to, I probably wouldn't have got the opportunity to talk to them if I didn't have a podcast.
Yeah, definitely that. It's It's one of the biggest benefits, to be honest, because if you were to have called up any one of those guests out of the blue and said, shall we just meet on Zoom for a coffee? The likelihood of that coffee ever happening is probably about zero. But as soon as you say, I'd love to have you on my podcast, straight away you're going to get a yes. So the relationships that you build, and as you say, the doors that open because of a podcast, it can be immense. You just never know what's around the corner.
Exactly. So let's talk about Business Awards, because you've come on board this year as a sponsor of the Best Business Women Awards, which I'm very excited about.
Me too. I'm very excited.
So what's been your experience as a solopreneur of awards since you started your business?
Well, I used to run some awards of my own, as you know, for podcasting. We ran the Podcasting for Business Awards, which were great, really fun, but as you know, incredibly time intensive. So hats off to you, Debbie, and your team. We just didn't have the capacity anymore to run it last year. It doesn't mean we won't run it again, but at the moment, we're not going to run it. I've actually never entered a business award for myself.
Oh my goodness, I didn't know that.
I know. Yeah, I've never entered a business award. And no, that's not because I don't agree with them. I think they're an amazing opportunity for people. I don't know why I've never done it. I mean, you're inspiring me to, I mean, the look on your face right now, I know you can't all see this if you're listening to this. If you're on YouTube, you're like, you can see. But Debbie's flabbergasted here that I've never done that. I've just never done it, and probably should. I've had a few people say to me, why don't you enter this? And it's not because I don't agree with them. I think awards are an amazing thing, and they're fantastic for brand recognition, for for social, people can see what you do. They really show expertise. So maybe this year will be the year that I do enter something.
I'm going to make
see.
you enter something, I think, because I actually think what you've achieved is quite incredible, because, in a short space of time, you've got a really successful business and you've helped so many people get their message out there, because it's a form of getting your voice heard.
It is.
And I think what you've done is absolutely incredible. And I'm in awe of what you've achieved, to be honest with you.
That's very kind. Thank you.
So I think we need to have a campaign to get Lynsay Gould entering awards.
Maybe I will now. Maybe I will.
I think dipping your toe in the water as a sponsor, and when you come along in October, if you don't leave my event absolutely incredibly inspired, then I'm not doing a very good job.
Oh, I know I will. I know I'll be like, right, when's the next awards? I want to enter some more. I actually get your email with all of the different award categories as well coming up. So I don't know why I don't do it. So I must have been interested at, enough to sort of find out when these awards were running. I just haven't actually dipped my toe in to do it yet.
Well, I think it'll be a good opportunity for you to see what goes on. And there are loads of awards out there that I think you would be eligible for. And I think it's about go off and do some research and see what you think would work for you and what you want to be known for, really, which is what I always say to people. What do you want to be known for? Podcasting awards, there's not a huge amount of those, actually, is there?
There aren't. And the ones that are out there tend to be focused on large, very well-known podcasts, celebrity podcasts and so on. There are some notable smaller ones, definitely, focused around women, which is brilliant. But the majority of them are for huge podcasters. So, and most podcasters are indie creators. They don't have huge advertising budgets and production teams. So there should be more awards for smaller.
Well, we'll have to have a chat about bringing back the podcast.
I know. We just need to, it's the amount of time and space and resources it takes. And, we have a lot of client work. So we'll see. I'm not saying it'll never happen again.
No, it is a lot of work. And again, it's another thing where I think, we've seen lots of awards spring up and then they disappear after a year or so, because I think the organisers realise how much work's involved. And if I'm totally honest with you, it's our 10th birthday this year of the Best Business Women Awards. And I didn't really know the monster that I was creating as I created it. And it is.
10 years though. Congratulations.
I know. What a year. I've got my 100th episode of my podcast, 10 years of the Best Business Women Awards. And I had my my 25th business anniversary last year, and I didn't do anything, and I should have done. I kept thinking, oh, I'll do something, and I never got round to it. And I've just decided to hold off and do a big splash for 30 years, which will only be actually 3 years' time. So I
Yeah.
will do something then. But I think celebrating milestones and anniversaries is quite important, isn't it, really?
Yeah, it is. And because I'm the sort of person who does something and then moves on to the next thing. I think lots of people in our industry and entrepreneurs are the same. You're sort of moving on to the next thing. But when I do stop and think about, what I've achieved, it makes you feel great, doesn't it? It makes you sort of revved up for the next thing that's coming. It's so important to be grateful for the journey so far and stop and think about what you've achieved. 100% it is. I don't do it often enough, definitely not.
No, because when we spoke this morning, you were like, oh my goodness, 2019, I started my business. And I said to you, wow, that's 5 years. And you were like, oh yeah.
Yeah,
Oh,
you
5
just
years,
move
yeah.
on to the next thing.
And actually, 5 years is quite an important milestone in any business, because I think the stats are 98% of startups will not get past the 5 year mark.
Wow.
So you are part of that magical 2% who
Oh,
got to the
fantastic.
5 year mark. And I know that from, I own a networking company as well, and we see a lot of startups coming through that. And if we look at the stats from that does bear out, to be honest with you.
Mm,
Most people, I think, they start a business, and keeping it running and keeping all the plates spinning is tough,
yeah.
because you don't have your HR department, your finance department, your different departments dealing with
No,
things, and
no.
you have to do it all yourself. So me and my husband have a little joke, and I always go, oh, I think that's I'll call John, his name's John, and I'll just call John in the technical department and he'll sort it out. So we have our own little in-house jokes about it. And I think that's the thing that really gets a lot of people. It's just having to do everything by yourself, because you alluded to that,
Yeah,
the starting stage, the twilight entrepreneur that's sort of got their business but also running a career still, trying to
yeah.
mesh the two. It's tricky, isn't it?
It's so hard. And actually, my husband's been in our business now 2 years, at the end of this year. And before he joined my business, he was often the one saying, Lynsay, are you going to stop work now? Are you going to close your laptop? Are you going to finish? Are you going to stop? Because I would regularly be waking up, opening my laptop, getting started, editing all day, doing all the
Yeah.
marketing, and I would be on till past 10 p.m. And I think there's a time and place for that hustle. There's a time and place for that really hard work. And I don't regret any of it. I
No.
absolutely love it. But now he's in the business. He's like, oh, yeah, I get it now. I get why you had to do all of that.
I know, it's hard.
Gets it.
And I always have my laptop on holiday, and I hope my business coach isn't listening to this. He's always saying, you've got to, but I find unplugging quite hard, because even though I
Mm,
do have people that work for me, ultimately I like to just check on everything, make sure things are running smoothly. And that's my biggest problem, is switching off, if I'm honest with you.
do you know what,
Because
though? I think I'm going to counteract that a little bit, because I don't think there should be any shoulds around this,
no.
because I think we should normalize the fact that if we love our work, then why not? Yeah, but if you want to go on holiday and take your laptop, take your laptop. I'm exactly the same. That doesn't mean that I don't have breaks. I have lots of breaks and I have lots of time out, and I do have holidays and I do switch off, but I wouldn't feel guilty about taking my laptop away and checking in on the team and emailing clients, because I love it. I love what I
Yeah.
do, and I'd feel lost if I didn't have my work. I absolutely adore it. So yeah, I would say don't worry, business coach. She's
Oh.
fine.
So we always end our podcast with either tips or, listening to what people are up to for
Mm.
the next year. And I mean, you have already given us so many tips about podcasting and about business in general, really. So what's on the agenda for the podcast boutique for 2024?
Yeah, well, lots actually. We're in the process of creating a new course. We have a course available at the moment for people who wanting to start a podcast, but we're doing something different. So that's coming out any day now, actually. That's
Oh,
nearly finished. And I've just launched a mastermind as well for women who are podcasters who want to grow their podcast. Because that's been a bit of a gap in the market. There are lots of
mm.
masterminds out there. There aren't any masterminds for women in podcasting who really want to use their podcast as a tool to grow their business. So that's been fantastic. We launched that in March, and that's growing from strength to strength. So I'm excited to see where that goes this year. We're down at the podcast show in May. So if anybody does come down to the podcast show in London in May and you see me, come and say hi. I always like to
Oh, when is that
meet.
on?
It's I think it's the 22nd and 23rd of May in London. It's the third year it's been on. It's a pretty new conference, but it's always really good fun. The last couple of years, it's been mainly about actual podcast businesses, but this year there's a bit more of a creator focus. So it'll be great for indie podcasters to go down there. So yeah, if you go down there, come and say hi. Yeah, we're more of the same. You know, we're all about scaling this year. It's about working with the right clients. I've always been passionate about getting more women's voices heard. So a lot more work with women on their confidence and getting them ready for podcasting and then helping them grow once they've launched as well. That's important to me.
Oh, do you know what, Lynsay? It's been amazing working with you and the team. And I am eternally grateful for you, for everything that you did for me to get this to 100th episode.
Thank you. Really
So
appreciate that.
I'm really excited to be working with you with the awards this year. So that's going to be amazing. And we've never met in person.
We
So if we
haven't. I
get
can't
to
wait. Give you a
meet
big hug. I don't
in
even care if you're a
person,
hugging person. You're
I
getting
am a
one.
hugging person. So we will be having a lovely photo together,
We
and
will.
we will be able to meet and have a glass of champagne together in October
It'll be
at the
fab.
awards. Yeah, I know. I can't wait. I love meeting people that I've sort of developed a relationship with that I haven't ever actually met physically.
Yeah, it's
Because
always,
it's
oh, I thought you were taller or smaller. It's always that, isn't it? Because you only ever see people sat down.
that top bit. So that's good. That's really exciting for me. And I just, I want to thank you. I want to thank you for your support, and I want to thank you for all of the ideas that you gave me and continue to give me, actually. Very inspiring. And if you're listening to the podcast, we will make sure all of Lynsay's links are in the show notes. And if you're watching on YouTube, we will put them into the description so you can contact her. Because I personally would thoroughly recommend working with Lynsay and her team. I had a great experience. And they took all the heavy lifting away from me and enabled me to bring this to life, which, wasn't easy, but we got there. And, I'm here 100 episodes later. So there you go.
Fantastic. Huge
proof of the pudding.
congratulations. And thank you so much for having me. It's been an honor to be on your 100th episode.
Thank you, Lynsay. Thank you very much. And I wish you continued success with your business.
And you. Thank you.